The Educational Process by H.L. Mencken. From Education, Prejudices, 3rd Series, 1922. First printed in the New York Evening Mail, January 23, 1918. Next to the clerk in holy orders, the fellow with the foulest job in the world is the schoolmaster. Both are underpaid, both fall steadily in authority and dignity, and both wear out their hearts trying to perform the impossible. How much the world asks of them, and how little can they actually deliver. The clergyman's business is to save the human race from hell. If he saves 1/8 of 1%, even within the limits of his narrow flock, he does magnificently. The schoolmaster's is to spread the Enlightenment, to make the great masses of the plain people think. And thinking is precisely the thing that the great masses of the plain people are congenitally and eternally incapable of. Is it any wonder that the poor birchman, facing his labor that would have staggered Sisyphus, seeks refuge from its essential impossibility in a Chinese maze of empty technic? The ghost of Pestalozzi, once bearing a torch and beckoning toward the heights, now leads down dark stairways into the black and forbidding dungeons of Teachers' College, Columbia. The art of pedagogics becomes a sort of puerile magic, a thing of preposterous secrets, a grotesque compound of false premises and illogical conclusions. Every year sees a craze for some new solution to the teaching enigma, an endless series of flamboyant arcana. The worst extravagances of private docent experimental psychology are gravely seized upon. The uplift pours in its ineffable principles and discoveries. Mathematical formulae are marked out for every emergency. There is no sure cure so idiotic that some superintendent of schools will not swallow it. The aim seems to be to reduce the whole teaching process to a sort of automatic reaction, to discover some master formula that will not only take the place of competence and resourcefulness in the teacher, but that will also create an artificial receptivity in the child. Teaching becomes a thing in itself, separable from and superior to the thing taught. Its mastery is a special business, a sort of transcendental high jumping. A teacher well grounded in it can teach anything to any child, just as a sound dentist can pull any tooth out of any jaw. All this, I need not point out, is in sharp contrast to the old theory of teaching. By that theory, mere technic was simplified and subordinated. All that it demanded of the teacher, told off to teach, say, geography, was that he master the facts of the geography book and provide himself with a stout rattan. Thus equipped, he was ready for a test of his natural pedagogical genius. First, he exposed the facts of the book. Then he gilded them with whatever appearance of interest and importance he could conjure up. And then he tested the extent of their transference to the minds of his pupils. Those pupils who had ingested them got apples. Those who had failed got fanned. Following the second round, and the same test again, with a second noting of results, and then the third, and then the fourth, and the fifth, and so on, until the last and least pupil had been stuffed to his subnormal and perhaps moronic brim. I was myself grounded in the underlying delusions of what is called knowledge by this austere process, and despite the eloquence of those who support newer ideas, I lean heavily in favor of it, and regret to hear that it is no more. It was crude, it was rough, it was often not a little cruel, but it at least had two capital advantages over all the systems that have succeeded it. In the first place, its machinery was simple. Even the stupidest child could understand it. It hooked up cause and effect with the utmost clarity. And in the second place, it tested the teacher as and how he ought to be tested, that is, for his actual capacity to teach, not for his mere technical virtuosity. There was, in fact, no technique for him to master, and hence none for him to hide behind. He could not conceal a hopeless inability to impart knowledge beneath a correct professional method. That ability to impart knowledge, it seems to me, has very little to do with technical method. It may operate at full function without any technical method at all, and, contrariwise, the most elaborate of technical methods cannot make it operate when it is not actually present. And what does it consist of? It consists, first, of a natural talent for dealing with children, for getting into their minds, for putting things in a way that they can comprehend. And it consists, secondly, of a deep belief in the interest and importance of the thing taught, a concern about it, amounting to a kind of passion. A man who knows a subject thoroughly, a man so soaked in it that he eats it, sleeps it, and dreams it, this man can almost always teach it with success, no matter how little he knows of technical pedagogy. That is because there is enthusiasm in him, and because enthusiasm is as contagious as fear, or the barber's itch. An enthusiast is willing to go to any trouble to impart the glad news bubbling within. He thinks that it is important and valuable for to know. Given the slightest glow of interest in a pupil to start with, he will fan that glow to a flame. No hollow hocus-pocus cripples him and slows him down. He drags his best pupils along as fast as they can go, and he is so full of the thing that he never tires of expounding its elements to the dullest. This passion, so unordered and yet so potent, explains the capacity for teaching that one frequently observes in scientific men of high attainments in their specialities. For example, Huxley, Ostwald, Carl Ludwig, Jowett, William G. Sumner, Halsted, and Osler, men who knew nothing whatever about the so-called knowledge of pedagogy and would have derided its alleged principles if they had heard them stated. It explains, too, the failure of the general run of high school and college teachers, men who are competent by the professional standards of pedagogy, but who nevertheless contrive only to make intolerable bores of the things they presume to teach. No intelligent student ever learns from the average drover of undergraduates what he actually carries away has come out of his textbooks, or is the fruit of his own reading and inquiry. But when he passes to the graduate school and comes among men, if he is lucky, who really understand the subjects they teach, and, what is more, who really love them, his store of knowledge increases rapidly, and in a very short while, if he has any intelligence at all, he learns to think in terms of the thing he is studying. So far, so good. But an objection still remains, the which may be couched in the following terms: that in the average college or high school, and especially in the elementary school, most of the subjects taught are so bald and uninspiring that it is difficult to imagine them arousing the passion I have been describing. In brief, that only a donkey could be enthusiastic about them. In witness, think of the four elementals: reading, penmanship, arithmetic, and spelling. This objection, at first blush, seems dismaying, but only a brief inspection is needed to show that it is really of very small validity. It is made up of a false assumption and a false inference. The false assumption is that there are no donkeys in our schools and colleges today. The false inference is that there is any sound reason for prohibiting teaching by donkeys, if only the donkeys know how to do it, and to do it well. The facts stand in almost complete antithesis to these notions. The truth is that the average schoolmaster on all the lower levels is, and always must be, essentially and next door to an idiot. For how can one imagine an intelligent man engaged in so puerile an avocation? And the truth is that it is precisely his inherent idiocy and not his technical equipment as a pedagogue that is responsible for whatever modest success he now shows. I here attempt no heavy jocosity, but mean exactly what I say. Consider, for example, penmanship. A legible handwriting, it must be obvious, is useful to all men, and particularly to the lower orders of men. It is one of the few things capable of acquirement in school that actually helps them to make a living. Well, how is it taught today? It is taught, in the main, by schoolmarms so enmeshed in a complex and unintelligible technique that, even supposing them able to write clearly themselves, they find it quite impossible to teach their pupils. Every few years sees a radical overhauling of the whole business. First, the vertical hand is to make it easy, then certain curves are the favorite magic, and there is a return to slants and shadings. No department of pedagogy sees a more hideous cavorting of quacks. In none is the natural talent and enthusiasm of the teacher more depressingly crippled. And the result? The result is that our American schoolchildren write abominably, that a clerk or stenographer with a simple, legible hand becomes almost as scarce as one with Greek. Go back now to the old days. Penmanship was then taught, not mechanically and ineffectively, by unsound and shifting formulae, but by passionate penmen with curly, patent leather hair and faraway eyes. In brief, by the unforgettable professors of our youth, by their flourishes, their heavy downstrokes, and their lovely birds with letters in their bills. You remember them, of course. Asses all, preposterous popinjays and numbskulls, pathetic imbeciles. But they loved penmanship. They believed in the glory and the beauty of penmanship, and so they got some touch of that passion into their pupils. Not enough, perhaps, to make mere flourishers and bird blazoners, but enough to make sound penmen. Look at your old writing book. Observe the excellent legibility, the clear strokes of your "time is money." Then look at your child's. Such idiots, despite the rise of scientific pedagogy, have not died out in the world. I believe our schools are full of them, both in pantaloons and in skirts. There are fanatics who love and venerate spelling as a tomcat loves and venerates catnip. There are grammatomaniacs, schoolmarms who would rather parse than eat, specialists in an objective case that does not exist in English, strange beings, otherwise sane and even intelligent and comely, who suffer under a split infinitive as you or I would suffer under gastroenteritis. There are geography cranks, able to bound Mesopotamia and Baluchistan. There are zealots for long division, experts in the multiplication table, lunatic worshippers of the binomial theorem. But the system has them in its grip. It combats their natural enthusiasm diligently and mercilessly. It tries to convert them into mere technicians, clumsy machines. It orders them to teach, not by the process of emotional osmosis, which worked in days gone by, but by formulae that are as baffling to the pupil as they are paralyzing to the teacher. Imagine what would happen to one of them who stepped to the blackboard, seized a piece of chalk, and engrossed a bird that held the class spellbound. A bird with 1,000 flowing feathers, wings bursting with parabolas and encycloids, and long ribbons streaming from its bill. Imagine the fate of one who began, "Honesty is the best policy," with an H as florid and, to the child, as beautiful as the initial of a medieval manuscript. Such a teacher would be cashiered and handed over to the secular arm. The very enchantment of the assembled infantry would be held as damning proof against him. And yet it is just such teachers as we should try to discover and develop. Pedagogy needs their enthusiasm, their naive belief in their own grotesque talents, their capacity for communicating their childish passion to the childish. But this would mean exposing the children of the Republic to contact with monomaniacs, half-wits. Well, what of it? The vast majority of them are already exposed to contact with half-wits in their own homes, and they are taught the word of God by half-wits on Sundays, and they will grow up into be knights of Pythias, odd fellows, red men, and other such half-wits in the days to come. Moreover, as I have hinted, they are already fact-to-face with half-wits in the actual schools, at least in 3 cases out of 4. The problem before us is not to dispose of this fact, but to utilize it. We cannot hope to fill the schools with persons of high intelligence, for persons of high intelligence simply refuse to spend their lives teaching such banal things as spelling and arithmetic. Among the teachers, male, we may safely assume that 95% are of low mentality, else they would depart for more appetizing pastures. And even among the teachers female, the best are inevitably weeded out by marriage, and only the worst, with a few romantic exceptions, survive. The task before us, as I say, is not to make a vain denial of this cerebral inferiority of the pedagogue, nor to try to combat and disguise it by concocting a mass of technical balderdash, but to search out and put to use the value lying concealed in it. For even stupidity, it must be plain, has its uses in the world, and some of them are uses that intelligence cannot meet. One would not tell off a Galileo to drive an ash cart, or an Ignatius Loyola to be a stockbroker, or a Mozart to lead the orchestra in a nightclub. By the same token, one would not ask a Duns Scotus to instruct sucklings. Such men would not only be wasted at the job, they would also be incompetent. The business of dealing with children, in fact, demands a certain jejunity of mind. The best teacher, until one comes to adult pupils, is not the one who knows most, but the one who is most capable of reducing knowledge to that simple compound of the obvious and the wonderful, which slips into the infantile comprehension. A man of high intelligence, perhaps, may accomplish the thing by a conscious intellectual feat, but it is vastly easier to the man or woman whose habits of mind are naturally on the plane of a child's. The best teacher of children, in brief, is one who is essentially childlike. If I had my way, I should expose all candidates for berths in the grade schools to the Binet-Simon test and reject all those who revealed a mentality of more than 15 years. Plenty would still pass. Moreover, they would be secure against contamination by the new technique of pedagogy. Its vast wave of pseudo-psychology would curl and break against the hard barrier of their innocent and passionate intellects, as it probably does, in fact, even now. They would know nothing of learning situations, integration, challenges, emphases, orthogenics, mindsets, differentia, and all other fabulous fowl of the teacher college aviary. But they would see in reading, writing, and arithmetic the gaudy charms of profound knowledge, and they would teach these ancient branches, now so abominably in decay, with passionate gusto and irresistible effectiveness, and a gigantic success.